been 3 years since Between the Buried and Me have given us new material. 3 years doesn't sound like a lot of time, but for some reason it's felt like forever. Since 2012's the Parallax 2 Future Sequence, Between the Buried and Me really haven't given us anything. And now, April 3rd today, they have given us a brand new single off of their upcoming album. The single is called The Memory Palace, coming from the album to be released soon, The Coma Eclectic. And what a return it's been. The Coma Eclectic is a concept album. What a big surprise coming from Between the Buried and Me. And the thought of it reminds me a lot of one of my favorite albums ever by Arion, The Human Equation. Of course, as you all know, I am a huge fan of Adi and Anthony Lucason's work, and The Human Equation was about a man stuck in a coma following a car crash, and each song was a day, and he was struggling with his internal emotions and memories to wake up and reconcile things in his life. And it was an incredible album. And the concept of coma eclectic reminds me quite a bit of that. Man's in a coma, apparently, from what we understand, and he is reliving his past lives. And in each one, he has to choose if he'd like to stay or move on to try and find something more perfect. And each song will play out a section of the world, of the past lives that he's going through, much like a Twilight Zone kind of thing, like its own self-contained section, but with some possibly bigger overarching story. Memory Palace is near the latter half of the disc, and none of the tracks on Coma Eclectic are over 10 minutes, which is sort of a surprise for any Between the Buried and Me fan, because as we all know, they love their long songs, and we love their long songs, of course. Long songs in prog are great. They have a chance to breathe and expand and grow. But it doesn't always necessarily have to be the case. Sometimes you could have a somewhat shorter, decently length song and still have it be great. And the Memory Palace comes in at just under 10 minutes. Now, a lot of us have been wondering, because people didn't necessarily find that Parallax 2 Future Sequence was for everyone. Not everyone loved it. A lot of people really liked The Great Misdirect. And obviously, Colors was legendary. It's what put the band on the map. Sure, you have The Silent Circus and Alaska and the self-titled, but let's be honest, Colors is what put Between the Buried and Me on the map. And a lot of people have been like trying to get back to that, like, oh, I want them to do more like that, I want them to do more like that. Between the Buried and Me knows that they can't do that, so they're moving in their own direction and doing what they want, which is ultimately what works. Now, the Memory Palace is much better than what most people were probably expecting. A lot of people weren't digging Between the Buried and Me, how it went after Parallax 2. I never had a problem with it, but there were a lot of people who weren't fond of it for whatever reason. I don't know why. But hey, I think if they had any issues or concerns about the way Between the Buried and Me was going, upon hearing this song, it'll go right out the window. This is that classic Between the Buried and Me sound. The fact that, you know, you don't know what's going to happen next. The song structure is chaotic and constantly shifting, but never in a violent way. Of course, we do know when it does shift violently on a song like White Walls, where it's constantly moving all over the place like a schizophrenic crazy person, but that's an amplified version of Between the Buried and Me's original style. Here we have, you know, all the things that make prog great. Well, especially the prog that Between the Buried and Me does. Great mixes of clean and harsh vocals, lots of really good work in the instrumentation. The main guitar line to that keeps coming back to the guitar refrain, if you will. It's just so addicting. It sounds great. You know, there's a lot of good stuff on display here. This is what we've come to expect from Between the Buried and Me, but that doesn't mean it's, okay, I've heard this before, because they're always moving forward. Prog is about moving forward, progressing, trying new things. And they've done that here. Yeah, sure, it's the idea of the fact that they don't stick on one style too long and can handle any genre they like. Think about some of the moments on Colors, right? You know, there was some parts in there that you're like, what? It's like there was a section where it felt like you were in an Irish pub or something. It was like, what's going on here? And that's why it's perfect. Now, this doesn't seem as heavy as Colors was, but we can't know that because this is just one single off of a full album. But of course, you think of some moments on Colors where it was just the relentless stuff, you know, like near the beginning of Colors during the first track or two, there was some good stuff, and obviously as it progresses and the album gets heavier and heavier and heavier. But, you know, I'm sure we're thinking of so many moments on there where it did that. But on this song, you know, you have the constant evolution and going back to familiar territory as a sort of refrain, but not entirely. You know, the musical aspect is a refrain, but the vocals and stuff are always changing and different. Now, since the lyrics haven't been published yet, it's hard to say, you know, what's going on in the story at this point, but Memory Palace evokes some quite interesting thoughts about, you know, I think of the, I know it's not exactly related, but the anime OVA Genius Party, which was done, a movie of sorts, an anthology done by Studio 4C, 4 Degrees Celsius, I believe. I'm not sure how it's said. They're the same people behind the Animatrix, behind stuff like Tech on Concrete, and Mind Game. So, you know there's good stuff there. And there was one Happy Machine that it was in there. And if you haven't seen it, go ahead. I recommend seeing the whole movie. But if you want to get the reference, watch Happy Machine. It's like 15 minutes long. And I couldn't help but be reminded of Happy Machine while listening to this song. And perhaps the whole album will be much like this, because it sort of has that similar feel to it. You know, the idea of a place where everything is all collected into one experience, and, you know, it is the palace of memory, something that exists purely out of the form of memory alone. You know, something very sci-fi and very bizarre, something that takes place in the middle of nowhere, and is literally just a place where all memory is nexused together. I love the concept for this album. And the song has some great moments. It knows when to be heavy and in your face with plenty of screaming and growling. Knows when to go for maybe some of the more punky sounding vocals. And the music itself, great pacing. Always coming back to what you know for a little bit to give a refresher, and then back into the weird stuff. Now, this definitely isn't the weirdest Between the Buried and Me has ever done. Again, we'll have to see how the album's going to turn out. But this is a great start on it. You know, they have their big bombastic moments and the slower moments, and constantly shifting in sounds and styles. You know, if you've listened to Between the Buried and Me before, you know what this is going to sound like. And if you weren't happy with some of the previous works, give this a listen. You're gonna love it, because Between the Buried and Me, even if it doesn't sound the same as Colors did, I was really, really reminiscing about the way Colors was executed while I was listening to this. It brought me back to that. So even if this song at least isn't as heavy, who knows if the album will be, I was reminded a lot of the structuring, or rather lack thereof, that was present on Colors. And I found it to be a great listen. Very fun, very enjoyable, especially after, excuse me, after the disappointing releases of March 31st, where we had 3 Days Grace is Human that was not really all that great. We had Nightwish's Endless Forms Most Beautiful, which had its great, great, great moments with the first half, and then Greatest Show on Earth and Eyes of Sharabat Gula. And then we had Hollywood Undead's Day of the Dead, which I haven't done a review on, and I may not. But let's be honest here, if you like Hollywood Undead, chances are it's a guilty pleasure. I know it is for me. We're not going to get into that. You know, other than that, this year is, you know, we're having some really great albums coming out this year. And I'm excited that Between the Buried and Me is making some this year, and it's going to be really great. You know, this album is going to give Steven Wilson and Enslaved and Alkaloid a run for their money. If you haven't listened to those albums, you too, Enslaved in Times, Steven Wilson, Hand Cannot Erase, and Alkaloid, The Malkuth Grimoire. Good. Steven Wilson, he does this really amazing progressive rock, progressive metal. This one he does sort of a more 80s style, whereas Raven That Refused to Sing, amazing album from a few years ago with 70s influence. Enslaved is progressive black metal, great. And the Malkuth Grimoire is basically a whole bunch of guys from stuff like Dark Fortress, Obscura, Necrophagist, you know, Non-Euclid, crazy stuff, in this amazingly technical, extreme death metal band, and they're great. You know, we've seen some really good contenders this year in the metal and not necessarily non-metal genres. And Between the Buried and Me, this album's going to give people a run for their money because this is sounding a lot like the Colors era did, but with a little more maturity perhaps behind it. Not that Colors wasn't, but you know, there seems a lot more focus on trying to make it tight rather than meandering. So I'm definitely excited for this album. Even more excited because in August, Between the Buried and Me is going to be coming here to Buffalo with Animals as leaders and The Contortionist. That's going to be a great show, especially since the album's going to be out by then. So give the song a listen. You can go and listen for free. It's streaming on the band's SoundCloud, link down there, and let me know your thoughts on it if you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'd really like to break down the song individually and discuss it, but you know what? If anyone knows Between the Buried and Me, or just based on what I said, you know we'd be here for a long time trying to discuss it because there's constant shifting and changing. It's chaotic but beautiful. Give it a listen. You got nothing to lose except for 10 minutes of your time, but you won't lose it because it's wonderful and you're going to love this song. Thanks for coming out, guys. I'm Kenshin, and I'm peacing the fuck out. We'll see you guys later.